professional actors, you go in and just jump in and do it, best of your ability.
Let me say, can I say one thing?
please.
To me, the great Stanley Kubrick was an actor's enemy. And I can point to movies that he's done, the worst performances.
Every single day, I dig up another wild story from Hollywood's golden age, the moments that built a time we'll never forget. If you want to keep those memories alive with me, hit that subscribe button. It won't cost you a dime, but it means the world. Thank you for being here. Now let's dive in. Robert Duvall has finally broken his silence, and the entire Hollywood scene is in shock over what he just said. After 6 incredible decades in the industry, the 94-year-old legend dropped a truth bomb, admitting there were 4 people he couldn't stand, not even for a minute, through his whole career. Duvall, known as the ultimate professional, disciplined, talented, and pure class, has always been seen as one of Hollywood's quiet giants, calm, respectful, no drama, at least on the surface. But behind that composed look, old grudges never really disappeared. Deep down, he was carrying memories he tried to bury for good. And now, in a jaw-dropping interview that's shaking the film world to its core, the Oscar-winning icon, the man who helped define generations of cinema, finally spoke out. He said what he never dared to say before. Duvall revealed the names of the 4 actors he simply couldn't stand. "I've kept my mouth shut for decades," Duvall reportedly said. "But at this age, what am I waiting for? It's time to tell the truth." His words tore through the industry like lightning, not just because of what he said, but because of who said it. Robert Duvall, the man everyone believed would take Hollywood's biggest secrets to the grave, finally let it all out. For him to speak after more than half a century shows just how deep these feuds really ran. The grudges ran deep. Deep enough to follow Robert Duvall well into his 90s. Sources close to him swear these weren't just small disagreements. These were full-on clashes that changed the course of movies, altered performances, and even rewrote Hollywood history.
Home from the asylum every night, and he had a girlfriend named Rusty. Dusty and Rusty, they both dressed in white, and she was this much taller.
Can you imagine how different those iconic films would have been if peace had actually ruled those sets? Now that Duvall has finally spoken up, Hollywood's on edge. Everyone's whispering, trying to figure it out. Who are the 4 names, and what truth has been hiding behind all those smiles, red carpets, and fake award show friendships? But before that shocking list comes out, we have to understand why a man like Robert Duvall, famous for his privacy and calm, finally decided to open up. Insiders claim it wasn't anger that drove him. It was reflection, that kind of late-life honesty that hits when legacy starts to mean more than reputation. One longtime associate, who chose to stay anonymous, said, "He's been watching all these documentaries that rewrite history, showing harmony where there was tension and friendship where there was jealousy. That fake storytelling reportedly started eating away at him. The final straw came during a grand tribute to his career, a celebration meant to honor his legacy. Sitting quietly in the audience, Duvall watched clips from his most legendary scenes, moments shared with actors he secretly couldn't stand. The crowd cheered, the applause roared, but Duvall just sat there, boiling inside as the narrator gushed about creative partnerships and lifelong respect. He later told his interviewer, "I sat there listening to all that fake talk about mutual respect and creative partnerships," Duvall said, while remembering how one of those people used to deliberately step on my lines just to ruin takes, and another one tried to get me fired from what became one of my signature roles. That was the breaking point and the exact moment the legend had enough. At 94 years old, with an Oscar, countless nominations, and a name carved deep into Hollywood's history, Robert Duvall decided he had nothing left to protect. The image, the illusion, the fake harmony, none of it mattered anymore. The truth did. He reportedly told friends he wanted the next generation of actors to see what really goes on behind the glitz and glam. He said he wanted young actors to understand that even the greatest films aren't always born out of peace and unity. Sometimes they come straight out of jealousy, ego, and pure chaos behind the camera. That's when the bombshell hit, and Hollywood nearly stopped breathing. The first name on Duvall's list, Dustin Hoffman. Duvall called him the credit thief who never stopped. And that was only the beginning. Once upon a time, Hoffman and Duvall weren't rivals. They were friends, or at least that's what Duvall thought. Back when both of them were broke actors hustling in New York City, they shared a tiny apartment, splitting rent and chasing the same dream. Dustin and I were struggling actors together in New York, Duvall recalled. We were friends, or at least I thought we were. But as the years went by, Duvall learned that friendship meant something completely different to Hoffman, and the truth behind their bond was about to change everything. Back in the early 1960s, their bond looked unbreakable. Two hungry young actors pushing each other, staying up all night rehearsing, dreaming big and cheering each other on. But before long, Duvall started to notice something off, something that didn't sit right. His own ideas were showing up, word for word, in Dustin Hoffman's auditions. I'd worked for weeks on a specific interpretation for an audition, Duvall explained. I practiced it nonstop in our apartment. Then suddenly, Dustin would get called for the same role, and he'd use my exact approach, sometimes line for line. When Hoffman landed those gigs, he'd tell people that Duvall had inspired him. Duvall didn't hold back, firing back sharply. That's a fancy word for theft. Even as their careers exploded, that tension never truly went away. During the making of True Grit in 1969, where Duvall played the outlaw Ned Pepper, Hoffman would constantly call him up, asking for advice while preparing for Midnight Cowboy. I spent hours on those calls, helping him shape Ratso Rizzo's voice, Duvall said. But later, when Duvall read an interview where Hoffman claimed he developed that iconic voice by studying homeless people in New York, something inside him snapped. For months, I realized my help had been erased completely, he said with disbelief. Not once did he mention our conversations. The final straw came in 1971, when both men were in the running for the lead in The French Connection. The part eventually went to Gene Hackman, but what happened behind the scenes burned itself into Duvall's memory forever. That was when I stopped taking his calls, Duvall admitted. I realized some people never stop taking from others. They just get better at pretending it's collaboration. That line hit hard, and insiders later backed it up. Sources close to the casting process claimed Hoffman didn't just borrow ideas. He allegedly went all in, trying to sabotage Duvall's chances completely. According to reports, Hoffman told director William Friedkin that Duvall was difficult and uncooperative, using old theater gossip as so-called proof. Duvall believed that lie cost him a career-defining role, and that was the line that could never be crossed. That's when it stopped being competition, he said firmly, and turned into pure sabotage. Years later, Duvall finally confronted Hoffman about what happened, and Hoffman denied everything. He denied it, Duvall recalled. But I heard it directly from Friedkin himself. Even after that, Duvall never went public, not back then. He stayed composed, shared stages with Hoffman, attended the same award shows, even offered polite compliments about his work. That mask of professionalism fooled everyone. The industry saw only respect between two acting powerhouses. No one suspected that a quiet hostility was simmering beneath the surface. For decades, it stayed buried under fake smiles and red carpet photos. So when Duvall finally broke that silence, Hollywood gasped. The truth about Hoffman was shocking enough. But what came next blew the roof off the industry. The second name on Duvall's list, a man once thought untouchable, a living myth in Hollywood's golden circle. Marlon Brando, Duvall declared. The most destructive ego I ever encountered. Duvall didn't hold back for even a second. He laid it all out, raw, unfiltered, and sharp as a knife. In Hollywood, he said, great performances don't always come from great relationships. Sometimes they survive in spite of terrible ones. His tone was fierce, his honesty brutal. That's the reality of this business nobody talks about, he declared, dropping truth bombs one after another. When he finally said Brando's name out loud, even the most hardened Hollywood insiders froze in disbelief. Marlon Brando? The man the world worships as one of the greatest actors of all time? Duvall didn't deny the legend's brilliance. He was a genius, no question, he admitted. But he was also the most destructive ego I ever encountered in this business. Brando wasn't just unpredictable. He was dangerous in his own way. A man who could derail an entire production just to prove he had the power.
People like it, some don't. Many people do. And we're proud of it, and we're happy to be here tonight to celebrate the judge.
And when Duvall clashed with him, it wasn't some mild disagreement. It was a full-blown battle of pride and control that turned into Hollywood legend. It all went down on the chaotic set of The Chase in 1966, a movie mostly forgotten today, even though its cast was pure royalty. Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, Jane Fonda, and Robert Redford. But behind those polished posters and smiles, a psychological war was raging, one that would permanently change how Duvall saw acting, fame, and respect. Duvall revealed Brando had a cruel little trick. He'd deliberately change his performance every single take just to make the editing process a nightmare. He'd do it on purpose, Duvall said, if he didn't like the director's approach. Brando didn't just mess around, he intentionally ruined the coverage of other actors' scenes. He liked to call it protecting the integrity of the performance, but Duvall called it what it truly was: professional sabotage. The tension between them kept building and building until it finally exploded during one crucial monologue, one of Duvall's biggest, most emotional moments in the entire film. Multiple crew members later backed up Duvall's story, confirming every painful detail. Brando would make faint, barely audible noises off camera while Duvall delivered his lines. Just loud enough for the microphones to catch them. Take after take ruined, until finally, by the fifth one, Duvall snapped. After the fifth ruined take, I confronted him, Duvall said. What happened next turned into a brutal Hollywood lesson he'd never forget. Brando just smiled, that famous smug grin everyone knew, and said, "Maybe you should be stronger in your choices." Duvall paused as he remembered that sting. That was Marlon, he said. He'd sabotage you, then frame it as your weakness. What a power move, and a cruel one. What makes this revelation so shocking is how completely it shatters the image the world had of their relationship. For decades, Duvall had nothing but praise for Brando in public, calling him an inspiration, a genius, a man who reshaped acting forever. But behind the cameras, he was quietly carrying the bitterness of that humiliating experience. Years later, fate threw their names together again, both appearing in the same cinematic universe with The Godfather. But the twist? They never shared a single scene together. Back then, everyone thought it was just coincidence. Now it looks like it might have been something far deeper. Now it feels deliberate, Duvall admitted. I learned more from watching Marlon than from anyone else. But what I learned wasn't just about acting. I learned how not to treat colleagues. I learned that genius doesn't excuse cruelty. That raw mix of admiration and disgust, the respect for Brando's talent, but the deep disappointment in his ego, explained why Duvall kept silent all those years. But just as Hollywood was still reeling from the Brando bombshell, Duvall dropped another name. And this one hit even closer to home. The third person on his list, James Caan. Duvall described him as competitive to the point of malice. This revelation shook insiders especially hard because Duvall and Caan's chemistry in The Godfather was the stuff of movie legend. Caan's fiery Sonny Corleone and Duvall's calm, calculating Tom Hagen became one of the most realistic brotherly duos ever captured on film. Jimmy and I created one of the most believable brother relationships in film history, Duvall said. And we did it while barely speaking to each other off camera. That's acting and tension at its finest. Their problems started early, right from the first rehearsals. Both men were determined to stand out in a cast overflowing with talent and ambition. Duvall, ever the quiet craftsman, approached every scene with discipline and precision. Caan, on the other hand, thrived on raw energy, sometimes too much energy. Jimmy was competitive to the point of malice, Duvall recalled. He'd deliberately try to upstage everyone, especially me. Whenever Duvall had an important line or a key emotional moment, Caan would suddenly start doing something distracting, tapping his fingers on the table, fidgeting with props, or pulling exaggerated expressions to steal the spotlight. What the world saw as brotherly tension on screen was, in reality, a real clash of egos, one that simmered quietly behind the scenes for years. Anything to steal focus. Anything to grab the spotlight. That constant battle for attention finally boiled over during the legendary Corleone family meeting scene, where the characters debate whether to go to war. What looked like brotherly heat on screen was, in reality, pure rivalry behind the camera. Hollywood had no idea that the incredible chemistry between Duvall and Caan was powered by real-life competition that almost wrecked the magic we saw on screen. The tension hit its peak on The Godfather set when Robert Duvall was quietly talking to director Francis Ford Coppola about Tom Hagen's motivations. Out of nowhere, James Caan barged in with a smirk and tossed out a mocking comment about overthinking glorified secretary roles. That was it, the final straw. That was the moment I decided we would never be friends, Duvall recalled. From that day forward, Duvall said he made a silent decision. Tom Hagen would always watch Sonny carefully in every single scene. That quiet intensity, that subtle tension became the spark that made their on-screen relationship so real. It worked, he said, because that's exactly how a calm, strategic man like Hagen would behave around a hothead like Sonny. What still stuns people is how perfectly the two men hid their feud for decades. Duvall and Caan fooled everyone, smiling together at reunions, laughing during interviews, radiating that same brotherly warmth that fans loved so much on screen. They kept the illusion alive with total precision. When we were promoting the film, we both knew what was at stake, Duvall explained. We weren't going to let personal issues damage something that important. So we smiled, told the right stories, and played our parts. He paused before adding, That was acting. The kind of acting that doesn't win Oscars, but earns respect. That quiet professionalism, that decision to protect the work even when resentment ran deep, says more about Robert Duvall's character than any trophy ever could. It also explains why these explosive conflicts stayed hidden for so long, buried under decades of rehearsed smiles, red carpets, and carefully staged photo ops. But while his clashes with Brando and Caan were mostly professional battles, Duvall's fourth revelation went much deeper. This one, he hinted, was personal, and it hit Hollywood right in its golden heart, the final name on Duvall's list, Robert Redford. Duvall called him the fraud behind the golden image, and those very words made Hollywood gasp in disbelief. Robert Redford, the ultimate golden boy, the symbol of class, intelligence, and artistic integrity. For decades, he was seen as untouchable, the poster child of elegance, activism, and charm, beloved by audiences and critics alike. But according to Duvall, that picture-perfect image was nothing more than a well-polished mask. Redford built the perfect persona, Duvall said, the serious craftsman, the idealist, the man of principle. But the reality I experienced was something else entirely. Behind that charming smile and calm, collected voice, Duvall claimed, was someone very different. A cold opportunist who treated crew members like furniture and viewed fellow actors as obstacles to be outshined. The contrast between Redford's public reputation and Duvall's private experience couldn't have been more shocking. Their feud first sparked during the filming of The Natural in 1984. Duvall played Max Mercy, the cynical sports columnist opposite Redford's heroic baseball legend, Roy Hobbs. But what was supposed to be a respectful collaboration between two Hollywood greats quickly turned into a behind-the-scenes rivalry that would haunt both men for years. What should have been an easy, respectful collaboration turned sour fast. Duvall quickly started noticing Robert Redford's behavior toward the crew, and it wasn't pretty. Entire teams would wait around for hours while Redford took care of business. He'd keep everyone on standby, Duvall recalled, not because he was deep in character, but because he was on the phone handling deals while the whole crew just stood there waiting.
You're looking for something, but you don't necessarily know what you're looking for. So you just let it go where, and eventually when they say action and cut, you throw that all out the window.
Right.
That's not artistry, Duvall said sharply. That's arrogance. As filming went on, the tension only grew heavier. The energy on set became so sharp it almost vibrated. And that same intensity seeped straight into their scenes together, giving their confrontations that electric, authentic edge audiences loved. But what nobody realized at the time was just how real that tension truly was. Duvall claimed that Redford's image of quiet artistic integrity was really hiding something far more self-serving. He repeatedly pressured director Barry Levinson to trim my role, Duvall alleged. He argued that the scenes where Max Mercy challenged Roy Hobbs's myth weren't necessary, but Duvall said he saw right through the act. It became obvious he saw any strong presence opposite him as a threat, Duvall explained. This wasn't about serving the story. It was about making sure he dominated every single frame. The irony was brutal. On screen, Redford played a baseball hero whose reputation was being questioned by a tough journalist. But behind the scenes, he was allegedly doing everything he could to silence that same journalist's voice in the movie. What infuriated Duvall the most wasn't just the ego. It was the hypocrisy. The gap between who he pretends to be and how he really acts is massive, Duvall said with disbelief. To him, the contrast between Redford's golden image and his real behavior wasn't just disappointing. It was proof that Hollywood's biggest myths weren't built on truth, but on power and polish. Duvall reportedly told his interviewer, "The man preaches collaboration, but behind the scenes, he's calculating every move to protect himself." His tone turned sharp as he continued. He'd stand on stage at Sundance talking about artistic purity, then show up on set demanding final cut privileges and veto power over other actors' casting. The gap between Redford's polished public image and the behavior Duvall witnessed left him completely stunned. It was the ultimate case of Hollywood double standards, the saint in the spotlight, the tyrant behind the camera. But the moment that sealed it, the one Duvall said he could never forget, came during post-production on The Natural. He decided to confront Redford directly about what he saw as behind-the-scenes manipulation. What happened next, witnessed by several crew members, burned into Duvall's memory forever. Redford just looked at me and said, "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." That line hit Duvall like a punch to the chest. In that one sentence, everything became crystal clear. The divide between image and reality, humility and ego, truth and illusion. That moment, Duvall later said, crystallized everything. The fraud behind the golden image. I never looked at him the same way again. That statement, perhaps more than any other, sent shockwaves through Hollywood. From one Robert to another, it wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a mirror held up to the entire industry, cracking open the myth of Hollywood's so-called good guys. Behind every polished smile and humanitarian speech, Duvall hinted, might be a ruthless ambition hiding in plain sight. Those polished, smiling legends everyone once thought were untouchable suddenly looked human and deeply flawed. The golden glow that had surrounded Robert Redford for decades began to flicker, and the industry could no longer pretend not to see the cracks. In the days following Duvall's explosive interview, Hollywood was thrown into total chaos. Shock, denial, whispered confirmations, even quiet admissions started surfacing everywhere. Representatives for Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, the only living actors Duvall had mentioned by name, released carefully worded statements expressing surprise at his remarks while emphasizing their deep respect for his legacy. But those responses, they felt too polite, almost rehearsed. Behind closed doors, the tone was completely different. Insiders began quietly backing up Duvall's story. Crew members from The Natural reportedly shared matching accounts of Redford's controlling behavior on set, describing moments where decisions seemed to revolve around his comfort, not collaboration. Meanwhile, a former assistant director from The Godfather confirmed the long-rumored tension between Duvall and James Caan, saying it was impossible to miss, even when the cameras weren't rolling. Even legendary director Francis Ford Coppola was asked about it, and his response spoke volumes. "The chemistry you see on screen," he said, "sometimes comes from very complicated personal dynamics behind the camera." That, coming from Coppola himself, was about as close to confirmation as Hollywood ever gives, and the ripples didn't stop there. According to sources close to Duvall, several big-name actors have privately reached out to thank him, not just for the honesty, but for finally saying what so many had been afraid to admit for years. The truth had cracked Hollywood's golden mirror, and now everyone was wondering what other secrets might still be hiding behind the shine. Finally, someone said out loud what so many in Hollywood had only whispered behind closed doors. He spoke for a lot of us, one actor reportedly told a friend, echoing the sentiment that spread through the industry like wildfire. The message was clear. Robert Duvall's courage had opened a door that may never close again. As for Duvall himself, he seems lighter now. Not bitter, not angry, just free. After decades of staying silent, he's not out to destroy reputations or spark drama. He's simply setting the record straight. In a brief follow-up statement, Duvall explained, "My goal was never to hurt anyone's legacy, but to correct a version of history that's been polished into fiction." He added, "I've given 60 years to this industry and have always treated it with respect. Part of that respect means being honest about its realities, both the good and the bad." Duvall made it clear these weren't minor disagreements or isolated arguments. They were long-term patterns that shaped productions, influenced careers, and changed lives. "These truths deserve to be part of the record," he said firmly. "Not just the shiny version we all agreed to pretend was real." And now, as the entertainment world scrambles to process these bombshells, one question hangs heavy in the air, drifting over Hollywood Boulevard like smoke from a fire that's only just begun. Does Robert Duvall have more to reveal? His final words in that now infamous interview were chilling and cryptic. Those four stood out, but they weren't alone. And just like that, the 94-year-old legend stood up, left the room, and left Hollywood to face its reflection, raw, cracked, and unfiltered. Maybe, after all these years, it's finally time for the myths to fall, and for the truth to take the stage. What do you think about Duvall's confessions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you felt something real. Subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories, and share this with someone who still believes the golden age was all glitter and no shadows.